So I was thinking about doing a new regular set of videos focusing on one of the more unsung and eclectic corners of horror, the Giallo, for quite a while. Even after coming up with a quirky little title, Giallo Shots, I'm quite proud of that, I struggled with which one I should cover for the first. While I love Blood and Black Lace, Torso, Suspiria, and I assure you we will be getting to those eventually, I decided to focus the first video on Mario Bava's influential classic slasher, A Bay of Blood, since it's seen as such a huge inspiration to the Friday the 13th series, a personal favorite of mine, as well as scores of others. So here we go with the first installment of Giallo Shots. Welcome back to ML Miller Frights. I'm ML Miller. Before we begin, please do me a favor and punch that like button down below, share this video with all of your social media addicted pals, click subscribe to this channel, and ring that bell for notifications. A Bay of Blood, originally titled ECOLOGIA del DELITTO and REZIONE a CATENA, aka Twitch of the Death Nerve, Carnage, Bloodbath, Bay of Death, Chain Reaction, and Antecedent, Last House on the Left 2, and Ecology of a Crime. It was released in 1971 and directed by Mario Bava. A Bay of Blood was written by Mario Bava, Franco Barberi, Filippo Ottoni, Dardano Sacchetti, and Giuseppe Zaccariello. Mario Bava's influential tipping of the dominoes where one murder leads to the murder of that murderer, and so on, and so on, and so on, until there's basically no one left to kill, is as memorable as it is odd. Panned by some, applauded by others, A Bay of Blood is definitely a movie that will leave an indelible mark upon viewing 1 or 21. The story follows the trail of an inheritance which passes hands numerous times throughout the narrative. An elderly lady is killed by an intricate, quiet, and complex scene at the very beginning, setting the murderous wheels in motion for the carnage to come. While this opening might be a great beginning to an intriguing whodunit, Bava pulls a double whammy by having the murderer's face shown to be an elderly gentleman, who then is murdered by a hand from the shadows brandishing a knife. Soon more players jump into the mix, some plotting to snag the will of the elderly lady for themselves, others just lucky enough to stumble across the murder site. As the bodies pile up to a ridiculous height, the story culminates with a free-for-all as Bava plays it loose with the narrative and rather focuses his interest on how many people he can kill in how many different ways. There's an extremely high kill count for Bay of Blood, which became quite the thing to do in slasher films throughout the 80s and 90s. Jason Voorhees moves from one murderer to the next in the Friday the 13th series, and the story usually moves along with little regard for the death that was just highlighted on the screen, with only a heap of corpses referred back to in the final moments to remind us of the tally. This was common in slasher films, but A Bay of Blood did it well, and long before the slasher blueprint was even established. Though it was panned by critics when it was first released for its senseless and remorseless violence, it has now become a template for many a slasher to follow to this day. A Bay of Blood was so influential that entire scenes were lifted frame for frame and remade in the Friday the 13th films, particularly Part 2, which lifts both the spear through the lover's kill and the machete across the face kill. But A Bay of Blood features all sorts of memorable deaths on top of those two, making this one of the first to highlight not only the killing itself, but the variety in which the killings were committed. Various weapons are used, all done with gory glee and bright red splatter. Though it can be acknowledged for its masterful use of suspense and grisly attention to violence, A Bay of Blood is not the strongest of stories. Basically, the plot is moved along by the killings themselves, as if the cast is playing a morbid game of pass the baton. When the entire cast is killed and there's no one left to murderify, Bava simply introduces more characters to kill, betray one another, and end up dead themselves. The nonsensical and random way the story plays out and the generous use of red herrings makes it almost feel as if there was no story at all to begin with, and things were just barely threaded together by the kills alone. I can't cover A Bay of Blood without addressing the final kill of the movie, and if you don't want that spoiled, put on your earmuffs for the next 30 or so seconds. Okay, if anyone in the comments can help me here in regards to why the final two backstabbers are killed by the shotgun fired by one of the annoying kids, I'd love to hear it. Could it be that Bava is trying to highlight the never-ending cycle of violence man seems to be enamored with? Is he saying crime never pays by having the final survivors be children who have nary a care for the money everyone has been killing everyone else for in the film prior? Or is this ending with children blowing away their parents with a shotgun merely there for a final shock and nothing more? Having watched A Bay of Blood numerous times, I'm baffled and would love to hear your theories. That being said, A Bay of Blood is definitely a unique experience. It's often a quite gorgeous film, showing that Bava is not just a bunch of blood and shocks. Some of the construction of the scenes are downright breathtaking and must have taken quite a while to set up, just right to give a strong sense of the mysterious, the uncanny, and the unpredictable with various angles, strong shadows, and interesting details galore. While it's not your typical Giallo, as there isn't a mystery as to who is the black-gloved murderer in the shadows, with a pair of bumbling detectives attempting to piece it all together, there are Giallo elements such as the elaborate death sequences, layers and levels of evil represented, and an ethereal sense of morality. It's just a beautiful oddity of a movie, really, something that definitely has a reserved spot in the pantheon of Giallo horror despite its narrative shortcomings and perverse attention to stacking the bodies. Without A Bay of Blood, most likely the stage wouldn't have been set for all of those slasher films I loved as a kid, and for that, it's definitely worth your precious time and attention.
You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be, stuck inside your reality. You're doomed. Oh, you're doomed. You're doomed. You're doomed. Live the life that you are meant to be. Live inside